London, October 14th, 1887. The rain fell in a thin, whispering veil against the window panes of 23 Waltham Street when Mr. Stephen Rivers first came to see me. It was a tall, gray-faced man, his clothes clinging to him with the damp, and his eyes those hollow, haunted eyes spoke of sleepless nights, and a mind tormented by worry. "I beg your pardon, Mr. Grave," he said, wringing his hat in trembling hands. "I have come to you because I fear something dreadful has befallen my daughter." I bade him sit by the fire, and in that trembling glow he told me his tale. "My daughter, Hannah Rivers, has suffered 4 weeks with strange visions of a house by the sea, upon an island known to the locals as Salem's Island. She spoke of it as though it called to her, whispering her name, bidding her to come. Against my counsel, she departed 6 weeks past, saying only that she must find the truth of that place, and that she would write each day." He paused, his voice breaking. "For 2 days the letters came, each more fearful than the last. She spoke of figures in the fog, of chanting heard beyond her window, of a warning left upon her pillow written, in a hand not her own. And then nothing, no word since." He leaned closer, his breath shaking. "Detective Grave, I beg of you, find my daughter. Find her before that house swallows her as it has so many others." Outside, the thunder rolled across the city, like some vast creature stirring in its sleep. I took up my pen and made my first note. Case: the disappearance of Miss Hannah Rivers. Location: Salem's Island, off the coast of Whitby. Date: October 1887. I could not then have known that the name Salem's Island would haunt me all the days of my life. Letter 1. Dated September 3rd, 1887, Salem's House, Salem's Island, off Whitby. My dearest father, I pray this letter finds you in good health and spirits. The journey to Salem's Island was long and most unpleasant. The sea rough, the air heavy with mist. Even the sailors spoke little, and when they did, it was of the island in tones hushed and fearful, as though it were a name best left unspoken. The house itself stands upon the cliff, like a wound upon the earth, vast, black, and shrouded in ivy. The windows, high and narrow, seem always to look inward rather than out. A chill pervades the very walls. The servants tell me it is the sea air, though I sense something deeper, older. I have taken a room facing the north, where the surf breaks upon the rocks far below. At night, the sound is like a voice murmuring beneath my window, low and ceaseless. I cannot always tell whether it comes from the sea or from the house itself. There are but few inhabitants here. The caretaker, a gaunt man named Mr. Havelock, avoids my gaze and walks with a limp. He told me that the house once belonged to a family named Bast, whose lineage vanished without record many decades ago. He would say no more, only that the sea keeps what it takes. Father, the dream has returned. I see the same darkened halls, the same whispering doors, but now there is a figure at the foot of my bed, tall, shadowed, and crowned with what seems like tendrils of the sea. I wake with the taste of salt upon my lips and the echo of distant bells that no one else hears. Yet, I cannot leave. Something binds me here. Curiosity, or perhaps the call of whatever sleeps beneath the island. I feel it, watching. I shall write again tomorrow, once I have explored the lower rooms. With Allah, your devoted daughter, Hannah Rivers. Letter to dated September 5th, 1887, Salem's House, Salem's Island, my dearest father. Forgive the unsteadiness of my hand. The candle burns low, and the storm without makes the very glass tremble as I write. I had not meant to trouble you again so soon, yet I fear I must. There are things upon this island I do not understand, and the house grows stranger by the hour. Last night, I ventured below, into the eastern wing, where the doors have long been sealed. The dust lay thick as ash, and the air hung heavy with damp. Upon the walls were carvings, not words, nor symbols I could name, but curving marks like serpents or roots, twining together in forms that seemed to shift as I gazed upon them. In the great hall below, I found a mirror black as obsidian. When I looked into it, I did not see myself. The reflection was the sea, churning and alive, lit by a pale light that came from beneath. There was something moving in it. passed and slew, and I felt its gaze pierce through the glass, through the walls, into me. Mr. Havelock begs me to leave, but when I ask why, he only shakes his head and mutters, "The tide is coming in." He will not speak of what the villagers call the Bast Awakening, though I've heard their chants at night across the water. Father, this morning a letter was slipped beneath my door. It was written in my own hand, yet I swear upon my soul I did not pen it. The message read, "Do not look to the sea when the moon is black. It will answer." I do not know what it means. The air here tastes of salt and rust, and the walls seem to breathe. I shall send this letter at once with the fisherman who leaves at dawn. If you do not hear from me again, please the rest of the letter trails off, the ink blurred as if by water. Closing parenthesis. Your loving daughter, Hannah. From the case notes of Detective Simon Grave, October 17, 1887, the morning I left London was cold and grey, the kind of weather that settles into a man's bones and refuses to leave. I arrived early at my office on Baker's Row to collect a few necessary things. My revolver, my notebook, and the brass magnifier that had served me well in less haunted affairs. Mr. Stephen Rivers had left us some sufficient for passage, along with his daughter's letters, each one more disquieting than the last. I read them again in the half-light of the office. The handwriting began neat, but by the second letter it trembled, as though written by a hand grown unsure of the world around it. By noon I had secured a carriage to the Whitby docks. The streets were slick with rain, and the fog rolled low over the cobbles, muffling the sound of the horses' hooves. London receded behind me like a memory already fading. The ship was a small coastal steamer, the Albatross, its hull weather-beaten, its crew a hard-faced lad who spoke little and drank much. As I stepped aboard, the captain, a broad, heavy man with a seamed brow and a mouth set in a permanent sneer, fixed me with a long stare. "You bound for Salem's Island, sir?" he asked, his tone more warning than question. "I am," I replied. "Detective Simon Grave. I am to inquire into the disappearance of Miss Hannah Rivers." At the name, several of the crew exchanged glances. One crossed himself. The captain spat on the deck, the sound sharp and final. "Best you mind your prayers on that island, Mr. Grave. Folks, they ain't quite right. Sea does something to you'll see, soon enough." It turneth how I, barking orders to the men as though to wash his words away in the noise. The voyage began under a sunless sky. By the time the coast faded behind us, a strange stillness had taken hold of the air. No wind, no gulls, only the slow throb of the ship's engine and the endless hiss of the waves. Somewhere beyond the horizon lay Salem's Island, and whatever truth awaited me there. From the case notes of Detective Simon Grave, I must have dozed in my cabin, though I cannot recall when sleep overtook me. The sea had grown strangely calm, the engine's rhythm dulled to a heartbeat beneath the boards. I remember only the low murmur of waves and the scent of brine before darkness closed over me. Then came the dream. I stood upon a shore of black sand beneath a moonless sky. The water before me was vast and still, and from its depths rose a house, not built but grown, its walls of living stone, its windows like open eyes. A voice deep, inhuman spoke a word I could not remember upon waking, though the echo of it left my chest hollow. I woke with a start. The lamp flickered. The air felt too close. From above came muffled voices. Two men arguing near the wheelhouse. I stepped into the passage and climbed to the deck. The night was heavy with mist. One of the sailors, a thin fellow named Briggs, was speaking in a low, trembling voice to the captain. "I saw it again," Sir Briggs said. "That house in the water, Sameas before, windows all glowing green, and that thing Colin my name. Thought I'd gone mad till I woke." The captain turned, scowling. "Keep it to yourself, man. Dream or not, I'll not have the crew thinking the island's calling to them." When he noticed me, he grunted. "You too, what?" "Don't tell me you've been dreaming. Primera, esitatet, a house upon a black shore." "Yes, the same, it seems." The sailor crossed himself, whispering a prayer. The captain spat over the railing, his eyes green. Then we're too close. Always starts when we near the damn place. As if on cue, a shout came from the prow, raw and desperate. Land. I see land. The fog shifted, and through it loomed the outline of Salem's Island. A dark mass rising from the sea, its cliffs steep and jagged, crowned by a single house, half shrouded in mist. Even from the deck, I could feel it watching, ancient and patient as the tide. The captain would not draw closer than the small pier. You'll find no man stayin' overnight here, he warned. We'll return at dawn, 3 days hence. If you ain't there, I take it you join the rest. The rowboat groaned beneath me as I crossed the short stretch of black water. The air grew colder, fouler. On the shore, the stones were slick and strange, beneath my boots smooth as bone. Salem's house rose before me like a silhouette carved from shadow, its chimneys twisted against the pale sky. No sound came from within, only the distant boom of the sea and the whisper of wind through broken glass. I remember thinking then that I had arrived not merely at a place, but at the threshold of some great and silent hunger. From the case notes of Detective Simon Grave. The rowboat scraped against the dock with a hollow sound, like bone against stone. A pallid mist clung to the planks and drifted in ghostly tendrils across the shore. No one came to greet me. The captain's oars splashed once more, and before I could turn, the ship had already begun to pull away, its outline fading into the fog until it seemed never to have been there at all. I stood alone on the pier, the smell of salt and decay heavy in the air. The stillness was complete, save for the low, rhythmic pulse of the sea below. Then, from the mist, a figure emerged. He was a tall man, lean and colorless, his coat worn thin, his eyes pale as ice. He did not remove his hat. His steps made no sound on the wet boards. Without a word, he thrust 2 folded papers into my hand. "I was told to give you this," he said, his voice rough and cold as the air itself. Before I could question him, he turned and vanished into the fog so quickly that I might have doubted he'd ever been there. The first note was brief, written in a cramped, unfamiliar hand. "You will find no truth here, only remembrance. Leave before the tide turns." The second was older, the paper damp and worn, the ink faded to a sickly brown. It bore a faint scent of salt and lilac, and the handwriting was that of Hannah Rivers. "To whom it may apply. If you found this letter, know that I am no longer myself. The house has taken something from me. A voice, a thought, perhaps a name. I hear it now, even in my waking hours, calling from beneath the stones. Do not follow where I have gone. The door below must remain closed. Pray for the island, for it remembers. H-E-E. The paper trembled in my hands, though whether from the cold or from some deeper unease, I could not say. I searched the dock for any sign of habitation. The wood was splintered and swollen with sea rot. The shore beyond was littered with drift and the remnants of old fires. Upon the stones near the cliff path, I found strange markings, circles and lines cut deep into the rock, forming patterns I did not recognize. They gleamed faintly, as though damp with some unseen oil. I took a rubbing of the symbols in my notebook and pressed onward. The path wound upward through black grass and twisted pines, the fog closing around me like breath. There were no birds, no insects, not even the whisper of leaves. Only the sea's slow murmur and, somewhere ahead, the faint outline of a house waiting upon the hill. Salem's house, patient and silent. I could not shake the thought that the island knew I was coming. From the case notes of Detective Simon Grave, the path to the house grew steeper as I climbed, the stones slick with moss and the air heavy with mist. Now and then I glimpsed the sea below, dark, restless, whispering against the cliffs like a living thing. The path ended at a gate of rusted iron, twisted and leaning, beyond which rose Salem's house. It was larger than I had imagined from the letters, a sprawling, irregular structure of dark stone, its chimneys crooked against the sky. The windows were tall and narrow, reflecting nothing. Ivy climbed the walls like black veins. No light showed from within. I pushed open the gates, its hinges screaming like something in pain, and crossed the overgrown courtyard. The door stood half ajar. Before I could knock, it opened the rest of the way with a groan. and there in the dimness stood a man. He was old, though not in years so much as in bearing, gaunt, with a stoop to his shoulders and eyes like dull glass. His skin was pale as wax, his hair thin and gray. His clothes hung loose, though clean, and his hands were long and stiff, as though unused to warmth. "You'll be Mr. Grave," he said quietly. His voice carried a faint rasp, as if scraped raw by the sea air. "I am," I replied. "Mr. Havelock, I presume." "No de donce," stepping aside. "You'd best come in. Nightfalls squeak here." The hall within was vast and cold. My footsteps echoed upon the flagstones. Dust hung in the air like smoke. The smell was faintly briny, as though the sea had somehow seeped into the very walls. Portraits lined the corridors, stern faces of men and women long dead, their eyes turned toward the sea. I paused before one. A young woman in a high-collared gown, her expression unreadable. The nameplate beneath was worn away, but I could have sworn her face resembled that of Miss Hannah Rivers. Havelock noticed my gaze. "The house remembers its own," he murmured. I turned sharply. "You knew Miss Rivers, then?" He hesitated, the candlelight trembling in his hand. "She came here 5 weeks past. Said she was drawn by dreams, like others before her. She kept to the upper rooms. Spent her nights writing, then." The voices began. The voices. He did not answer. He simply turned and led me deeper into the house. Past staircases that leaned, past doors nailed shut with iron spikes. The deeper we went, the colder it grew, until my breath hung in the air before me. At last, he stopped before a heavy door at the end of the hall. The wood was dark, scarred, as though something had clawed at it from within. "This was her room," Havelock sighed. "You'll find her things there. But mind yourself, Mr. Grave. The house don't take kindly to strangers." He set the candle upon a table and left without another word. I stood there for a long moment, listening. Somewhere in the house, perhaps far below, a faint sound rose and fell with the tide. Not the wind, not the sea. Something else. Something. Breathing. From the case notes of Detective Simon Grave after supper, a meager meal taken in silence, I found Mr. Havelock tending a candle in the hall. The storm had abated, though the mist pressed thick against the windows like frost. "Mr. Havelock," I began, "you said this house once belonged to the Bast family. Where are they buried?" He looked at me, long before answering. "There's a family plot on the grounds," he said at last, "behind the west garden, near the cliff's edge. But it ain't a place for visitors. The sea's taken half of it already." "I should like to see it all the same," I replied. He hesitated, the muscles of his jaw working. "As you wish. Just mind your step. The stones there don't always stay where you left them." He said no more. The path to the graveyard wound through brambles and dead ivy. The air was still and cold, the moon veiled by cloud. I carried a lantern, its light trembling over rows of weathered headstones. Many bore the name Bast, though some were so eroded as to be unreadable. Others seemed far older than the house itself. At the far end, half sunken, in earth, I found a smaller stone with no inscription, only a rusted cross driven into the soil. Beside it, half buried in the grass, something caught the lantern light. It was a locket silver, tarnished with age. Inside, under the cracked glass, was the image of a man, Mr. Stephen Rivers, and opposite it, a lock of hair tied with blue ribbon. Hannah's. I had barely time to draw breath when a voice rasped behind me. "You've no right here, Mr. Grave." I turned. Havelock stood at the gate, the lantern's glow flickering across his hollow face. "This ground is for family only," he said. "Best you leave it be. Things buried here don't take kindly to being disturbed." "I came only to seek the truth," I replied. "Miss Rivers is missing. Surely you would have me find her." His expression flickered grief or fear. I could not tell. Some truths, sir, are best left to the sea. He turned and vanished into the mist, leaving me alone among the graves. Later, when I returned to the house, I found the door to Miss Rivers' room locked. I called for one of the servants, a young maid named Marjorie, her hands trembling as she held the keys. She told us never to go in there, Marjorie whispered. Nevertheless, I said, it is necessary. The lock yielded with a groan, and I entered. The room smelled faintly of salt and lavender. The curtains were drawn, the bed unmade. Papers littered the desk, fragments of torn pages, their edges jagged as if ripped in haste. By piecing together what remained, I discerned 2 entries from her journal. Journal entry I saw him again this evening. The man in the hooded robe. He stood at the end of the hall, unmoving. I could not see his face. When I looked again, he was speaking with Mr. Havelock in the garden. I do not think he saw me, but I am certain Havelock knew he was there. They spoke for some time, though I could not hear the words. When they parted, the hooded man turned toward the sea, and for a moment the air around him seemed to bend. Journal entry 2, I have to go to the gravy. The line ended abruptly, the page torn down the middle. Whatever followed was lost. As I stood there, the candle guttered. From somewhere below, deep beneath the floors, came a faint, rhythmic sound, like a heartbeat echoing through stone. I gathered the pages carefully, my hands shaking. Something in this house was awake. From the case notes of Detective Simon Grave, the house was silent but for the sea's distant murmur and the faint ticking of the long case clock in the hall. Yet beneath that steady rhythm, I heard it again. The sound I had first noticed in Miss Rivers' room. Faint, irregular, and disturbingly alive. It came from below. Taking a candle and my revolver, I followed the sound down the corridor, past shuttered doors and portraits whose eyes seemed to follow me in the flickering light. At the end of the passage, half hidden behind a tapestry, I found a narrow door leading to the servants' cellar. The hinges groaned as I descended. The air below was damp, and the stone walls sweated salt. The sound grew clearer, a slow thump, 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 like something vast and heavy stirring beneath the earth. The floor trembled faintly with each pulse. I found no machinery, no wind through pipes, nothing to account for it. Only darkness and the echo of that heartbeat somewhere deeper still. When I returned to my chamber, the candle was burned low. I set Hannah's locket upon the table beside my bed and lay down, though sleep did not come easily. Sometime near dawn, I was awakened by a strange light. The locket was glowing faintly at first, 10 brighter until it pulsed with the same rhythm I had heard below. I reached out, and the world fell away. Primera, Drea, Meth. Hannah stood in the graveyard, her gown torn and her hair unbound, the locket shining at her throat. She moved among the stones, whispering names I could not hear. Behind her, the earth seemed to breathe. The graves shifted, sinking slightly with each pulse of the unseen heart below. Then the ground split open, and from the darkness rose a scream cut through the dream, sharp and human. You woke at once. The locket dark again. From somewhere downstairs came the sound of sobbing and hurried footsteps. I threw on my coat and descended to the hall. In the kitchen, I found Mr. Havelock crouched beside a woman, the maid Marjorie, who wept uncontrollably. "What is it?" I demanded. "What has happened?" The woman looked up, her face pale. "Oh, not again," was all she said before burying her face in her hands. Havelock rose, his expression carefully measured. "A bad dream, sir. Nothing more. The sea plays tricks on those who stay too long." "Mr. Havelock," I said quietly, "we both know there was more than a dream in that scream." "Estaré datam." May then gestured toward the servants' corridor. "Let us speak privately." In the kitchen's dim light, with the fire burning low, he leaned close. "You should not be here, Mr. Grave. The girl's gone, and the island won't give her back. That's all there is to it. But what lies beneath this house?" I pressed. "And who are the men Miss Rivers saw?" "The ones in masks." His face hardened. "Stories. Nothing more. You'd best be gone before the tide turns again." He left then, his footsteps heavy, the candle flickering out behind him. When he was gone, the servants began to whisper. One, an older woman named Mrs. Dare, clutched her rosary as she spoke. "We hear them at night, sir, the men in the masks. They come from the cliffs when the fog's thickest, chanting in that old tongue, same one the Bast family used in their rites. Mr. Havelock says it's not but wind, but we know better." Another servant added, "They say there's something under the graveyard. A vault, older than the house itself. That's where they go. That's what calls 2M. I wrote their words in my notebook, though my hand shook as I did. Outside, the wind had risen again, carrying with it a low sound that was almost a voice, and beneath the floor, faint but unmistakable, the heartbeat continued. From the case notes of Detective Simon Grave, the morning broke gray and still. The mist had thickened, pressing against the windows like a living thing. I woke with the uneasy sense that the house had shifted in the night, as though the walls themselves had drawn closer. When I went down to breakfast, the servants were hushed and pale. None would meet my eyes. Mr. Havelock sat at the end of the table, his hands clasped tightly, his gaze fixed upon the empty chair where Hannah Rivers might once have sat. He looked up when I entered. "You've been asking questions, Mr. Grave. Best you stop." "I will stop when I have my answers," I replied evenly. "There were sounds beneath the house last night. I mean to know what causes them." His mouth tightened into a line. "You'll find no answers here, only ruin. The island keeps what it's owed." When I pressed further, he rose abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Enough. You'll speak to no one about the house, nor the graveyard. I'll not have you filling the servants' heads with ghost tales and foolishness." He stormed out, the door slamming behind him. In his absence, the servants' fear deepened. They whispered among themselves, casting nervous glances at the windows, at the floorboards, at one another. I saw, too, that the house was changing. Along the baseboards and in the corners of the hall, circles of salt had been laid in the night. Some had been smeared or broken, as though by hurried hands. On the walls near the stair, symbols had been carved, crude spirals, hooked lines, shapes that burned the eye when stared at too long. When I questioned the staff, most turned away. One man muttered that he had seen Havelock walking the corridors before dawn, drawing things on the floor with his lantern turned low. That evening, as the fog thickened again, a soft voice called to me from the corridor. "Mr. Grave," it whispered. "Please, come quickly." It was Emily, one of the younger maids, her eyes red from crying. She led me to the old laundry room, far from the others, and shut the door. "He'll try to stop you," she said, glancing toward the hall. "He always does. The master knew too much. And now you're asking the same questions." "Tell me what you know, Emily," I said. "All of Italiano." She swallowed hard. "There's a place under the family graveyard. Older than the Basts, older than the island, some say. They built the house over it to keep it shut. That's what the salt is for. To bind it. But the sea keeps eating the cliffs, and the wards are failing." She reached into her apron and pressed something into my hand. A stone, smooth and cold, the size of a small ball. Strange carvings wound across its surface, spirals, dots, and lines that seemed to shift when turned in the light. "You'll need this," she whispered. "It's one of the ward stones. It keeps the whispers away, if you hold it close. Hannah had one too, but Havelock took it from her before she went missing." "Emily," I said, "what is beneath the graveyard?" Her lips trembled. "Not what, sir?" "Who?" "The Basts called it the sleeper beneath. The men in masks, they still go down there when the moon's gone. They feed it. Prayers, they say. I think it's more than that." Before I could question her further, the floorboards creaked outside. Heavy steps. Emily's face went white. "He's coming." The latch rattled, and Havelock's voice came through, low and hard. "Emily, Mr. Grave, what business have you in there?" I slipped the stone into my pocket. When I turned back, Emily was gone, the door to the servants' passage open, her footsteps fading into silence. Havelock entered, his expression cold as the sea. "I warned you, Mr. Grave. Curiosity is a dangerous habit on this island." I said nothing. The weight of the stone in my pocket seemed to pulse faintly, slow and steady, like a second heartbeat. And somewhere beyond the walls, beneath the graves and the sea, that deeper rhythm answered. From the case notes of Detective Simon Grave, when I went to leave the house that night, I found the front door locked. The key was gone from its place, and the latch held fast as though sealed from within. I tried the side door, also barred. Even the servants' entrance was bolted tight. A single scrap of paper had been pinned to the wood with a rusted nail. On it, in Havelock's hand, were the words, "Notice. Time." I turned sharply at the sound of soft footsteps behind me. Trying to get out again, came a voice. It was Emily, pale in the glow of her lantern. Rain had already begun to rattle against the windows. "Yes," I said, "and it seems I'm not permitted." She smiled faintly, sad, determined, and reached for her keys. "He thinks he can keep everyone in, but I have my own ways." With a click, the servants' door opened. A blast of cold, salt-laden air struck us both. Outside, the storm had begun in earnest. The wind howled against the cliff face, and sheets of rain drove sideways through the dark. "You shouldn't go out there," she said. "I've come too far to stop," I replied. She hesitated, then handed me a small, leather-bound book, its cover carved with the same spiral symbols as the wardstone. "You'll need this," she whispered. It was hers, Hannah's. "It's part of the binding." I nodded my thanks and stepped into the storm. The wind nearly tore the lantern from my hand. Lightning split the sky, revealing the dark bulk of the graveyard on the hill. The cliffs shuddered beneath the waves, and the rain fell so thick I could scarcely breathe. When I reached the family plot, the earth had already begun to flood. I found the stone door at its center, the one I had uncovered days before. It stood open now, blackness yawning below. From within came the low, rhythmic sound of chanting. 4 voices, deep, deliberate, in no language I knew. Lantern held high, I descended. The passage twisted downward, slick with moss and salt. The chanting grew louder until it seemed to fill the stone itself. I reached a long hole lit by green fire burning in iron bowls. There, 4 men in hooded robes stood in a circle around an altar. A.H. wore a mask, one of bone, one of metal, one of carved wood, and one of stone, each shaped into the twisted semblance of a human face. Their voices rose together, the words vibrating in my bones. When one of them turned, his mask catching the light, he saw me. The chanting broke. "Stop him!" someone cried. I ran. My lantern swung wildly, throwing the walls into motion. I turned down a narrow side passage, and a hand seized my sleeve. "Quiet," whispered Emily, pulling me through a low doorway. We crouched in darkness as the robed men thundered past. The sound of their feet faded, swallowed by the echoing corridors. Emily pressed a finger to her lips, then pointed ahead. Through an archway at the end of the passage, I saw a small chamber lit by a single torch. In its center stood a cage of iron, unwitting it, Hannah Rivers. She lay motionless, her skin pale, her breathing slow. "It's time to wake up," I whispered, moving toward her. Emily caught my arm. Not yet." "She's alive," I said. "I can see her breathing." "Yes? But she's not here," Emily replied. "All the girls who come to this island fall into that sleep. We call it the dream. Once they've been touched by him, the master, they belong partly to his world. You wake her before breaking the bond, and she'll die." "Then how do I break it?" She handed me the book again, her voice shaking. "You'll need this, and the keystone I gave you at the house. The book tells how to seal him. But beware, Mr. Grave, the master is not a man. He's an ancient being, older than the island, older than the sea. The Basts built this house to keep him bound. They failed. Havelock tried. He failed too. Thunder shook the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. Somewhere far below, the chanting resumed, deeper, faster, triumphant. Emily's eyes widened. "He knows you're here." I looked at the cage, to Hannah, to the book and the stone pulsing faintly in my palm. "Then let him come," I said. From the case notes of Detective Simon Grave, the chanting deepened until the walls trembled. Emily and I crept from our hiding place and moved toward the altar. The air was thick and cold. Drops of water slid down the stone like sweat. Behind the altar stood a slab pierced with a small round hole no larger than a coin. I leaned close, lantern dimmed, and through that eye of stone I saw the master. It was rising from a pit beyond, vast and formless, its shape shifting like smoke beneath water. Eyes if they were eyes opened and closed in its surface. Each breath it drew shook the ground. The sight froze my blood. I stumbled back, the lantern clattering to the floor. The 4 masked men had returned. Their chants swelled to a fever pitch. The torches guttered green. Hannah's cage shuddered, the metal twisting. "Now," Emily hissed. She thrust the book into my hands, opening it to a page where the ink seemed still wet. "Read it. The keystone will answer." The stone in my pocket burned hot. I spoke the words, though I barely knew their shape. The air screamed. The torches flared white. The 4 men fell to their knees, their masks cracking. The master turned. A single voice filled my mind. "You cannot bind what was before binding." Then darkness poured outward. The world spun. I was no longer in the vault. I was in my office, in London. Rain tapped the windows, the familiar clock ticking on the mantel. But something was wrong. The clock hung on the wrong wall. My desk was covered in salt, and upon it lay the stone, glowing faintly. A whisper coiled through the room. "Sleep. Detective, you've already failed." I seized the stone. Its heat flared up my arm like fire. The glow grew blinding, and the dream shattered. I was back in the vault, gasping. The master reeled, the light from the stone carving a wound across its shape. The chanting had ceased. The robed men lay still. Emily dragged Hannah from the cage as the chamber shook around us. "Finish it. Say, Creed." I pressed the keystone to the altar and shouted the final words. The pit closed like a mouth, sealing the thing below with a sound like a dying tide. The floor split, dust billowing upward, and the green fire went out. We ran up the stair, through the rain, across the graves that were already sliding into the sea. The cliffs roared as they broke apart. At the gate of Salem's house, the roof caved in behind us. Havelock stood upon the steps, his face lit by lightning. "It's bound again," he called, voice lost in the wind. But not forever. The sea took him then. Emily, Hannah, and I reached the shore as the albatross fought its way through the waves. The crew hauled us aboard, and before dawn the island was gone, swallowed by fog and rain. London, 1888. It has been 6 months since that night. Miss Rivers lives with relatives in Bath. She speaks rarely and never of the island. Emily remains in my employ as housekeeper, quiet, capable, always watching the windows when the wind turns east. As for me, I keep the keystone locked in a drawer. At times it feels warm, though the fire is out. Once, in the small hours, I thought I heard the slow beat of waves far below my floorboards. Yesterday a package arrived with no return address. A single seashell, black as obsidian, and a note in a hand I did not know. The tide is turning again. The clock on my wall ticks softly. Yet sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see it on the wrong wall, and the office fills with the scent of salt and decay. I tell myself it is memory, but in the hush between ticks, I swear I hear the sea and beneath it, faint but steady, a heartbeat, waiting.